All right, welcome everybody. This is going to be a little restoration that is going to take me a bit of time. So we'll see how much I can get recorded. Sometimes these projects, you got to kind of pull yourself away from them every once in a while because you stare at the screen for too long, you kind of get eye soreness and you start to look at things a little bit differently. So I definitely recommend when you do long Photoshop projects that you actually take a break every once in a while. One, just because you're sitting so close to the screen, and you want to refresh your eyesight a little bit when you're looking at these things for so long, especially when it's client work. When you're working with client work, you want to make sure that you are protecting your reputation. And in order to protect your reputation, you want to make sure that everything is as perfect as it can be or close to. And then there's also that fine balance where you have to think about what is it that how, because you can go endlessly with these things. You can continue to adjust pixels and adjust pixels and adjust pixels until you go nuts. So you have to find a stopping point. So you have to find that balance between what is the actual stopping point and what is it that you need to do, if that makes sense. Now, my computer is running a little weird, so I'm just going to check a couple of things here. See if that helps. So what I'm doing right now is just cloning this out, and I'm starting small because I just sat down and I want to warm myself up a little bit. Here's a little tip for everybody. When you're doing this kind of work, like, you're gonna hit your stride. Like they say, hitting your stride somewhere between like 10 to 20 minutes of starting. Okay, so like you want, when you sit down to work on something, you gotta be aware that like your attention level is gonna be mixed from what you were doing previously, right before you sat down to work. And so it does take a little bit of time to get into the mode where you aren't making mistakes and you don't have to hit Command Z a bunch of times to go back steps and stuff like that. So like you do want to find a nice balance between digital work and quality and speed. So with that said, you saw I was just working a little bit on the top fringes there just to get warmed up a little bit. What my task is here is this image will end up being then and now art from a commission client of mine, and she had a couple of prerequisites before I even do the read photography, and those prerequisites were to ignore her. So that is, let's try to get her out of the image as much as possible. Now I'm not going to do that with the restoration process because that would be too much work. I could just as simply cover her up with part of the now photograph. And sometimes when you're doing a then and now, you actually do want to wait till you are doing the blending of the old and new time periods together to actually do some of the restoring of the original photograph, because there's some areas you're not going to see on the final product that you may be wasting your time on restoring. Okay, but one of her things, like when you're working with clients, when you're working with commission work, your communication has to be great. Okay, so when we communicated about this project, her last name is Brody. Okay, so this is her family store, and they have a long history on Evans Street here in Greenville, North Carolina. They've been on like 4 or 5 locations here and continue to expand well through the 60s and 70s. So we're doing this project as a Christmas gift for her husband, okay? So one of the things that we need to do is remove this pole, and I'll zoom in a little bit on that, and you guys are going to see me use a lot of quick commands and stuff like that, and that's just for my own sanity. So, this isn't so much of a tutorial as to give you a behind-the-scenes look of what then and now is. And what we got to do first is remove this pole, because she wants this sign to be completely visible. And it's going to be a pretty decent sized chunk of time because I have to rebuild. I have to rebuild some of these letters, and it's going to be, you can do anything in Photoshop, but it's going to take a lot of time to make it look right, because this is the central focus point of her project. You see what I'm saying? Like, whether, in fact, this looks like the focal point of the image, but this is the focal point of her desire, okay? She wants to be able to see that Brody sign. She wants the people involved. She wants the then and now. In fact, we're actually going to photograph her driving her husband's car and put it right here because he's got an old classic car. And we're going to blend the cars together too. So it's going to be a really cool project. And I wanted to just build like a 1 hour, really quick, showing you behind the scenes of how this all happens. Okay, and it all starts with the source image, as you see here. This is the source image. And then you just go in and you start restoring. You restore it, you restore it. And then you go and you rephotograph it at the same time of day so that these shadows line up. And I was actually out there this morning and I found that this is probably about 9 a.m. right now with the time change that just happened. So this was probably 10 o'clock, around 10-ish, when this was photographed originally in the summer, okay? So it's about 9 o'clock in the fall, okay? So with that said, let's just go ahead and get right into it. And you'll know that if you watch me Photoshop a lot, there's a big thing about breaking up lines, okay? You want to start... You find a balance. You want to start by breaking up lines and using your clone stamp and patch tool and just breaking up lines until it gets a little bit more simpler. Because if you just start randomly on a certain area, you might get a little overwhelmed, and some areas come out to be a little bit easier. When you remove some of the harder parts get easier when you remove some of the easier areas first. Okay. So I don't want to give everything away here, but I am going to go ahead and just kind of focus on a couple of tasks at hand until I hit those letters, because those letters are going to be a little bit of a challenge, and so you're going to watch me struggle through those a little bit. And I'll probably end up drawing them in like a not too much dissimilar from a coloring book, okay? And I'm not happy with the way that line turned out, so I'm going to restart that line. That looks pretty good. And this is what I mean about breaking up the lines. You want to break up the lines, and then where it's real simple, real simple, break up the line, and then you can really just, you can do any selection tool around it and switch your patch tool and boom, okay? So you can see with just in a minute, I got a lot of that pull out of there, but I still have to do this area, okay? And then I also have to do around the letters yet, but I also got to remove these lines too from the electric pulse. And I probably will leave it here for the time being along this part of the image, because I don't know whether or not the now is going to go over that. And if that area is showing with the final product, what I'll do is actually go in and refine that a little bit more later. But what I want to do now is just get the bulk of the work out of there so that I can actually move on to rephotographing it and get this project out the door. And so when I was talking with my client, this is a little tip for everybody. When I was talking with my client, I actually gave her a discount on the price in agreement that she would allow me to record this and show it to everybody in our group and on YouTube and stuff like that, so that everybody can see what we're really doing here. And she loved that idea. She loved the idea. She loved being involved. I went out there, managed her expectations, and talked about all the creativity, and we didn't land on a final size yet because I don't know if we're going rectangular yet or not. So let's go ahead and let's start small here. This is what I mean with starting small. Sometimes you just want to start small and get rid of what you know is easy to get rid of. And there's a fine balance here when you're doing Photoshop. There's a fine balance between the mathematical calculation of what the task is at hand and how it actually looks, okay? Because you can get stuck on the mathematics and spend a lot of time for no real great reason removing stuff that you don't really need to remove, because visually with the human eye, you don't actually see it. Okay, and then that also goes into the size, okay? So the size that you end up with your final print will determine how much of these little tiny spots I've got to remove, like this little guy right here. If she's only getting an 11-inch by 14-inch print, I wouldn't have to remove that because you wouldn't visibly see that with the human eye, okay? So it's coming along here. You'll see me skip. I'm a little ADD when I go and do Photoshop because I jump around a little bit. Because again, I like to take where I know is going to be the most difficult area, I like to work around that first just to get all the easier parts out of the way, warm myself up a little bit, and then so once you get down to the difficult areas, it actually doesn't seem so daunting to accomplish. And this is a questionable one there. I'll probably leave that. I've been doing Photoshop for a very long time. In fact, I've actually been doing Photoshop for as long as I've been doing photography, surprisingly. For the most part, anyway, professionally. And if you're watching this and then you see, like, what is he, how is he doing it so fast or whatever, just know that, like, I've been doing this for a long time. So when you're doing Photoshop, don't try to, like, catch up with me or like do the speed that I'm at, because I've been doing this a long time and I can push these out rather quick as long as I stay focused. So what I'm going to do now is start to work on these letters a little bit, and just the area that I can see that line through. Okay, this is again that mathematical change. Okay, well, I know the line goes all the way through, but do I need to remove the whole line or can I leave some of it? Okay, looking pretty good. Alright, so you see that line there. We'll add some gray there. A little bit of light gray there. Follow that letter down. Just make sure it's nice and polished. You'd be surprised. The human eye picks up things. The human eye is drawn to distractions, and that's just natural. That's more of a primal thing than it is anything. It's to keep you alive. So you are prone to distractions. So you'd be surprised when you go and you actually remove these little bit of spots, how much attention ends up where you want it. Okay, see this line here and this line here and this dot there and a little dot there, there. Those are all dust spots or a scratch on the emulsion of the film and stuff like that. So you do want to go through and remove that. It is a bit of a task, and it does take several hours sometimes, and you do find yourself questioning, like, why am I going through this much time for these little dots? But I'm telling you, I mean, it really does add up. I mean, it really does. And that's really what shows, like, the human eye and attention, and getting underneath that. I mean, being a good photographer is knowing the skill of it, but also knowing the psychology behind why people buy, and especially why they buy in the photography field. But then when you come down to the actual design aspect, like I'm doing now, this is about understanding what humans see and don't see, okay? And you learn that through experience, okay? You learn that through experience in the photographic industry, and you can actually split test certain ideas and be like, oh, let's just see if anybody notices this. And a little funny story is when I was working for my mentor, I would do a lot of, my job was, I was the manager of his digital artist team, so I managed all of his Photoshop employees, and part of that job was to review everybody's work when they were done before I presented it to my mentor, Kirk Fleischauer. And what I would do with some of my edits is really funny. I would go in, like, and a lot of people, they don't even realize this. They got photos at home on their wall that would say, like, I would put my name really small in, like, a really, like, obscure area, so they wouldn't, you wouldn't really, I would blend the color in and stuff, and I would put it in somewhere. And, and then when they got home, they don't even see it, so you play with those little ideas and you find out, did they notice that? Okay, and then that teaches you a little bit more about the human attention span and concentration and stuff like that, and really what their eyes are drawn to. When you start out in photography, you talk about looking at the highlights a lot, and you should be doing that, but you're missing what's in the shadows if you don't pay attention to the shadows. And by looking at the shadows and comparing them to the highlights is going to tell you where that light source actually is, okay? And when it comes down to light sources, that is what photography is all about. If you don't have a light source, you're not going to have an exposure, okay? Because exposure is all about light, and understanding, understanding space helps a little bit. Understanding that the sun is your main light source, especially outside, unless you're completely blacked out internally. And then just knowing reflective light, okay? So everything you see in this photograph is reflective light. You don't see the actual light itself. You see the objects that the light is reflecting off of, okay? Which is a fun little dynamic to think about, because even though it's at the speed of light, when you capture a moment, it's actually in the past. You see what I'm saying? Like, because that had already happened. Maybe it was just a split second ago, but if you dilate time, that was actually in the past, no matter if it was a split second ago or a second ago. Like, it was still in the past, okay? So it's important to understand that light is reflective, okay? So everything that you see is light reflecting off of it. If there was no light, you wouldn't see anything, okay? So it's really important to understand that, and that goes into the importance of using an ambient light meter, okay? And just to follow that one up, is when you use an ambient light meter, you're actually reading the luminance of the light itself before it's actually reflected off of your subject, or off of your subject, okay? So it's more accurate, and it has no regard to color whatsoever. So, you gotta imagine that, like, if you're wearing a black shirt and you spot meter for that black shirt, well, we all know that black absorbs light more than white, right? So you're gonna get a missed exposure if you spot meter on black, because it's absorbing some of that light. So it's better to use a light meter and be way more accurate. But you gotta understand that when you use a light meter, you can't lean on it. That's what a lot of people do. They're like, oh, I'm gonna get a light meter, and it's gonna solve my exposure problems, and then I'm gonna be good to go. I mean, yes, and a little bit yes, but mostly no. It will help you. It will take the guesswork out of it. But you still need to be able to translate light in 2 dimensions, okay? And that's what our course is all about. Translating light in 2 dimensions, and that will make you the best photographer you can ever think of being, once you understand that 1, light is reflective, and 2, that 1, that light is reflective, and 2, that you have to translate the way that the camera sees the world and not the way that you see it, okay? You got to imagine that we as humans, we're walking around with 2 lenses, our eyes, okay? Your camera, as you know, only has 1 lens, and that's why it sees in 2 dimensions, and that's why we as humans see the world in 3 dimensions, okay? So when you're a photographer, when you're a good photographer, and you've learned the ropes, you start to understand that you got to create as much dimensionality as possible in a 2-dimensional image. So I like to call it 2.5D. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like not quite 3-dimensional, but it's also not 2-dimensional. It's got a lot of depth. And you create dimension with like this dark and light. Okay, so you go dark to light, and you do that across an image. More so than that, you want to look for that sort of thing before you even pull your camera out. You see what I'm saying? Like, before, you have to train your eye. Okay, and again, it's something that takes experience. You've got observation. You've got to be thinking about it. And eventually it'll be like riding a bike. Eventually it'll be like you're not even thinking about it. And it's almost a curse. I mean, it really is. It is almost a curse. Like, you will stop looking at things normally, and you will start to look at things the way your camera sees it. And it's hard to pull yourself out of that sometimes, especially when you're doing this for a living and you do this all day long. And so it's a little bit of a curse, but it makes you that consistent photographer that everybody wants to be. Anybody can go shoot an amazing image, but to do it consistently and to do it with like 1 frame or 2 frames and be done, just grab. And that's what I do with photography, and I feel like that's kind of what separates me from the herd right now, is that I pride myself on shooting extremely low frame counts. And that's because I use anticipation, planning, observation. There's so many things that go into photography that makes you a great photographer that has nothing to do with your camera whatsoever. It has everything to do with how your camera captures an image, but you have to understand. You have to understand it in your head, how that gets translated, okay? So just know that, like, it takes time, and then that's what our course is all about, okay? It's to rapidly accelerate that learning curve through a process called niche photography tracing. And that's what we do. We go through a variety of niches and we train your eye to see light in its truest form and to know that photography literally means to record light. There's a common misconception that photography is capturing a moment in time. And again, we talked about that a moment ago, where it's actually in the past a little bit, because light is reflective and the speed of light isn't instantaneous. Okay, so if you dilate time, it will be in the past. Okay, so you got to remember that, like, I don't even know where I was going at that point, but yeah, what I'm saying is all the thoughts that go into your head after you've been doing this for a long time, you start to realize that you're not capturing a moment in time, although it is a moment in time. You're really just capturing reflected light. Okay. And light is a beautiful thing, everybody. I mean, we all know what it's like. You know, you get up in the morning, it's a beautiful sunrise. You know, it's that calmness. And light is what photography is all about. And once you can get over that hurdle, once you can understand that, that's when you really start to shoot consistently. Okay, and consistency, I'm telling you, is so rewarding. It's so rewarding to just like go out and know that like you have a purpose. You're going out with a purpose, and it only takes you, because you're planning it so much. You're not going out there rapid firing, spray and pray, hoping for the best shot, and then reviewing your images after every couple sets and be like, okay, I got one good. You gotta slow down. Slow way down. It's like one of those moments like hurry up and wait. Okay? Especially when you're doing a then and now project like this, because I've got to actually be in place at a very specific time, and I've got to plan my people. So I'm actually bringing a couple of models with me to walk slowly with this crowd when I rephotograph this image, so that I'll have a blend of old and new people walking next to each other. Okay? So when I talk like that, it actually seems to go by a little bit easier, because I've been doing this forever, and like this can be a little mind numbing sometimes. So actually talking while I do this actually feels pretty good, because you don't even think about what you're doing. You just boop, 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 done. Okay, so that's looking pretty good so far. And again, you want to look at the mathematical versus the visual. Okay, so mathematically, I know that I'm not totally accurate, but visually, I'm looking pretty good besides this area, and I'm a little nervous of this section here. So I'm going to start down here, and I'm actually going to make a history snapshot, just in case I need to go back to that moment in history, okay? Oh, man. Whew, let's see. All right, I think I know what to do here. All right, so when we're looking at this, there's going to be an edge right here at the bottom of this sign. So I think I'm going to duplicate this edge, and I'm going to put it right here. But I'm going to do it very carefully, okay? And I'll look at the preview, and I'm just going to tap a couple times. Listen to my mouse, okay? I'm going to leave it there, okay? I just need that little square outline for right now, okay? That's all I need. I just wanted that there, okay? That's my little edge of the beat, okay? You see that? Now we're going to go in and we're going to clean around that. So we kind of flipped the script there a little bit. We went for the more difficult area first and then moved on to the simpler area. But remember, we're getting down to the wire here on this task. And again, it's been 23 minutes just to remove this area of the pole, okay? If you've ever, like, put flooring in and you notice you do a big room and it goes by really fast, and then you get to, like, a hallway and it suddenly takes all day, well, that's because you're making all those little tiny cuts, you know what I'm saying? So, like, when you're doing something that's in the wide open, when you're doing a task in Photoshop that's in the wide open, it can go by really fast until you get down to the wire like this, and it's suddenly like, oh my God, time is just dragging on and on and on. And then you want to make sure that your inputs, when you're Photoshopping, you want to make sure that your inputs are precise and careful, because you don't want to make a mistake and notice it later, and then you got to go in and fix that mistake. You'd rather address that mistake as you made it and just Command Z and go back, okay? Now, I don't like this line here, so I'm going to zoom way in here, and I'm going to use a really small brush here. And I don't like, that's a little hard. Let's see what my flow, I could probably bring my flow down a little bit. And just start, and this is what I meant about drawing. Again, it's like kind of like a coloring book. Now, I was selected there, that's why I wasn't really doing anything. So this is a little bit of a tense moment, because I've been staring at the screen now for 25 minutes, and I'm near the end of the project, and it's the most important area of the project, okay? So this can be a moment of attrition. You might get a little eye strain here, and this might be the moment to take a break, okay? But I'm pretty confident I can go ahead and move with this and just continue on, especially because I made a history snapshot. Now, if you're following along here and you're finding yourself lost a little bit, don't worry about it. This isn't so much of a training video as it is to show you behind the scenes. Otherwise, I'd be going through and I'd be explaining everything I do, and I'd be going to the toolbar for every tool I use. But going to the toolbar every time, yeah. If you can shave a second off of a task every time you do that input, and you do that input 100,000 times, you've saved 100,000 seconds. Okay, so like every little quick command can make a difference in Photoshop. All right. So again, getting down to the wire here, and you'll notice it's starting to get slower and slower and slower, and that's just because I want to make sure that my blend is really nice and smooth, and that no one will ever call me out for ever photoshopping the pole out. Okay. You have to protect your reputation. And sometimes, guys, everybody, sometimes protecting your reputation means putting in that extra bit of, sometimes not even extra bit, sometimes a significant amount of time extra in order to protect your reputation. Don't ever shortcut a client, okay? You charge your price, and you charge a significant price so that you don't have to shortcut your client. You don't feel the need to shortcut your client, and they know that, the smart one, they know that. And then you do that with your communication as well. You want to master tone, especially with sales, but especially with delivery when you're doing portraits. You want to master your tone, because even if your client doesn't even notice, they subconsciously or unconsciously notice that your tone has changed, and they're going to pick up on that energy the same way that a child picks up on the mother's energy. All your clients will pick up on your energy, and part of being a photographer is developing an energy that gets you the results that you want. Whether or not it's who you really are or not, honestly doesn't matter, because when I do portraits, I'm honestly I don't even recognize myself. Sometimes I'm like, who are you? Where did that even come from? And again, that comes down to turning your greatest, your personality weaknesses into your greatest strengths. I like to say, it's not me, it's not my personality that made me right for the job. It's the job that was right for my personality. Okay, so there's a reason why I'm a master of posing, and I'm really good at posing, especially posing at low frame counts and choreographed posing. But I'm pretty shy, and I'm pretty introverted. So suddenly, when I'm doing a shoot, it's just I suddenly turned extrovert, and it's become just robotic at this time. Not robotic in its delivery. It definitely feels genuine to my clients, and it is genuine. But you gotta take yourself out of it and put yourself in your client's shoes, because how do you feel when there's a big lens staring at your face? You gotta put yourself in that mindset, and then put yourself in that mindset when you're doing your shoots, so that you can understand where they are and take advantage, and then really open them up that way, if that makes sense. Okay, you find where they are and you open them up because you know how it feels. Okay, if you know how it feels, take your ego out of it, get inside of theirs, and make them feel great. Okay. Now let's go ahead and remove this line. And then we're going to just do a little preview here. Because I don't want to make this too long. Let's just do a little preview here. And let's just take a look at what we did so far. Remember, our task was to check out this line? Now, if I go back to the original main here. Whoa, hang on. Let's look at this pole right here. Notice how that pole is removed now? Okay. I want everybody to look right here, okay? Watch this pole get removed, okay? See how it's gone? Okay. Boom. So that took about 29 minutes and 37 seconds, and you can see that now that project is done. I still have a lot more to go, but I don't want to make an hour-long restoration video. This line will go away pretty easily. I'll draw around that pole, and then I'll move on to this water spot here, which is a very common occurrence with old photographs as they get developed in a chemical bath, and sometimes they get stacked on top of each other or something like that when they're not totally dry, and they'll stick to each other. So that's a common occurrence, and again, this will be a mathematical versus a visual alteration, because I don't want to do more than I have to do. You see what I'm saying? Like, I want to keep the realism as much as possible. Okay? So with that said, everybody, I hope you enjoyed that video. Let me know what you thought in the group, and we will be putting a whole about an hour-long video of the entire then and now art process together. From start to finish. So I will be making these videos here and there, and then smashing them all together and making a nice composited video of then and now art and the then and now art process and how it all works. So hopefully you enjoyed that, and we'll see you in the certified photo training group. I appreciate it. Thanks.